Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Hey, good people. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. Listen. Season 10 is for real, though. I mean, we've been at this for almost 200 episodes. We're focusing on Say It Loud, where we're just talking about our excitement, our proud, our unapologetic blackness on all of our seasons, but particularly in season 10. For all of you that have listened and supported for the past several years, thank you so much for helping us to get to this point. I keep promising you the presence of these scintillating discussions with Black brilliant thought leaders and authors and academicians and influencers and educators around the country. And today will not disappoint. I'm having back to the Black Like Me podcast studios, Dr. Kellie Carter Jackson. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Carter Jackson. She is the Michael and Denise 1968 Associate Professor of Africana Studies and the Chair of the Africana Studies Department at Wellesley College. She's the author of We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance. We're going to be talking about that today. And the award-winning book, Force and Freedom, Black Abolitionists and the Politics of Violence. And Force and Freedom was a finalist in the Frederick Douglass book prize and the winner of the James H. Broussard Best First Book Prize and a finalist in the Museum of African American History Stone Book Prize Awards for 2019. Listen, the Washington Post went on and listed Force and Freedom as one of the 13 books to read on the African American history, a history of violent protest on Slate's What's Next podcast was listed as one of the best in 2020, and she has given a TEDx talk on why Black abolitionist matters. Her essays have been published from everywhere from the New York Times to the Washington Post to the Atlantic, the Guardian, PBS, MSNBC, CNN, the Apple TV's Lincoln's Dilemma. She is certainly comfortable around podcasts and is a podcaster herself, which I really love. She's also has served as a historian in residence for the Museum of African American History in Boston from 2021 to 2024, and the commissioner for the Massachusetts Historical Commission. There's so much that's going on. Her next book project is entitled, this is when she does in her free time, Losing LaRoche. Am I pronouncing that right? Losing LaRoche. The story of the only Black passenger on the Titanic, which traces the story of Joseph LaRoche and examines the possibilities and limitations of Black travel in the Titanic movement. Dr. Carter Jackson, I am so glad to have you here. My jaw is tired from saying all those accolades. No, and and I love to read them because they are all representative
it's a lot. I tell people, keep it short.
I want people out here listening to know who they're dealing with and who I'm talking to. So welcome back. I hope that you're doing well.
It's good to be back. Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm happy to be back. It's always a pleasure.
Well,
so this is a lot of fun. I look forward
Yes,
to it.
I do too. You know, before I jump into discussing We Refuse, I want to just ask you some of our Black icebreaker questions because they're always just fun to have these discussions. So let me just start off with some that I haven't asked in a while. Did you have relatives or kinfolks, maybe friends who were either named Lil Man, Junebug, John, Mookie? I'm just kidding. Do any of those names resonate with you and your friends?
Some friends, yes, but we all had. Our nicknames were always longer than our actual names.
Really?
In my family, it was, my nickname was Kelly Girl. So
Got you.
Everyone has always called me Kelly Girl all throughout my childhood, and it's sort of stuck. My mom had sort of rhyming nicknames for us. Like my sister's name is China, and she would call her China Wine-Hub. And or China Doll, and just like we all had. My brother was the only boy, so he was always like my son, my only son. Like that. I was like, this is the longest nickname in the world, but like. Yeah, we all had long nicknames.
No, I love it. But in your friend circle, but you do some Mookies? Or did you know a John or
John, sure. Mookie, no.
Little Maine? This is my name, Maine.
Chucky. My brother was sometimes called Chucky by my aunt because his middle name was Charles.
No. I got you. Yeah. I got you. Sweet potato pie or pumpkin pie?
I mean, I don't really think there is an option. And sweet potato pie, hands down.
Yes, ma'am.
Like, hands down.
Yes, ma'am.
Like, there's no contest.
So it's definitely. So now you're from the Midwest, but you also came of age a bit in Texas. And so I'm not even sure if it's fair to ask this question because Texas is the South. Did you grow up eating grits or cream of wheat?
I love grits.
Really?
Oh, I love grits.
Okay, hold it.
And if you put sugar in grits, I will shank you.
Oh, no. Well, we're having technical difficulty. We're sorry. We cannot seem to find the signal for Dr. Kellie Carter Jackson.
I love grits. I love savory grits. I love shrimp and grits. I'm not from the low country, but I love shrimp and grits.
Okay.
I love grits and bacon. I mean, shout out to my sister Camille. She makes the best grits ever. A little bit of cheese.
Does she really?
Delicious.
You know what? Here in Madison, I'm thinking about having a grit off because I keep talking about sugar. And I grew up as a kid that put not only sugar and butter in my grits, because only for breakfast. I don't do that with the savory ones, like with shrimp in it. Yeah. But I would put my scrambled eggs, then my bacon, and some of my toast, like everything. It was a grit bowl. But I've been thinking about letting people do a sample of the savory and the sweet grits. So I might have to call up your sister Camille.
Can I just say,
please.
My favorite grits dish is like, it's a hodgepodge, and it's grits with cheese and bacon, but then it's like kale chips also sprinkled on the
And you judging me? You
like
gonna thank me
salty.
for adding sugar and you put kale?
They're like sort of salty, crunchy kale chips, but it tastes so good all mixed together.
I might have to try that. That does sound very interesting.
Yeah.
So grits, like Tang, is not just for breakfast anymore.
Yeah.
Oh man, let me ask you this question: what does it mean? When someone has good food and they say, "Oh, this is so good," it makes you want to slap. Who does good food make you?
Your mama. Makes me want to slap your mama.
You know what? Listen, my listeners, if you ever hear anybody say that, we are not condoning violence against mothers.
I know.
We're just saying, no, I'm just laughing. No, we're free here. We're not under
Either that or we'll say it tastes so good, you put your foot in it.
See, you read my mind. That was the next question. Yeah. What does it mean when you put your foot in something? It means it is superb.
Yeah, you threw down.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Now you work in academia, so it's probably not even fair to ask you this because you've probably been asked this your whole life, or no, you've experienced this. Have you ever been referred to by your non-Black colleagues as articulate?
Oh my God, all the time. Yes. More times than I care to recall. I mean, part of that is because I use my voice for so much. I podcast and I narrated my latest book, and I talk quite a bit. And listen, I get the sentiment behind it. Come on. I like it when people appreciate, I like listening to you. I appreciate when people say that. But I think the word articulate can be loaded because when it's said with surprise, like, I expected you to not be articulate. Right. That's sort of the connotation in that is, I didn't expect you to know how to speak. I'm shocked by this. That's where the dig comes from. But yeah, I've gotten that a lot. I've even, not so much anymore, but when I was in college and certainly when I was young, I got teased for sounding white, talking white. You talk like a white girl.
Oh, come on, yes.
Yeah, it was a lot of that.
Wow.
But it's funny because I was in speech therapy, like probably kindergarten through the 4th grade because, I had a speech impediment, but really I just spoke Black English. Really.
And they put you in speech therapy.
It was, yeah. Because I would say things like, who your mama? And people would be like, what is she saying?
Oh, if you said, I'm finna go to the bathroom, like, what's she gonna do in the bathroom? I'm finna go to the bathroom.
Now, I did struggle with my R's. I sometimes still struggle with my R's. Like, it's really hard to say right wing Republican. Like,
Well,
that
you
is
shouldn't.
so
You
hard.
shouldn't say that anyway. Why would you? That would give me a speech impediment.
The R's and like W's and W's that sound like R's are really tough. So I have to slow down.
I got you. You know, this might be a Midwest thing because I spent my early years in Chicago. I came to Madison in second grade in 1970 so that my mom could attend UW-Madison. But I remember, and it was mainly black women, and sometimes when they were expecting, they used to eat Argo starch. I remember this blue and white box. Do you?
Argo starch?
Like people would be outside jumping double dutch with a box of Argo starch, eating it like it's sunflower seed, like putting in their mouth. Ask an older female figure in your family, particularly if they lived grew up in like Chicago area. But yes, and I heard people say that it was sort of similar to that that sensation of when people used to eat dirt in the South, like that sort of.
Oh yeah, pica.
Exactly.
It's like people would eat soap.
Yes.
You know, like
yes.
I've had some pregnant friends who
eat dirt.
Would take a bite out of soap.
Out of soap.
Soap. Not dirt, but I've heard about dirt certainly during slavery. But if there's certain deficiencies, iron deficiencies
eat for it?
or what have you. Yeah, your body is trying to compensate for that, and sometimes you will crave.
That's probably what it is for starch, because when I bring it up, like when my mom was living, when I would bring it up, people would say, yeah, but we mainly did it when we were expecting. And so it was sort of, so if someone hears about someone eating Argo starch, like you would use this for laundry, like when you're going to be ironing.
Yeah, that can't be healthy.
It can't be healthy, but people say, oh, is she pregnant?
Especially not if you're pregnant. I mean, my God, I had 3 children, and I've never eaten starch while pregnant. Now, I ate a lot while pregnant, but not any starch.
Oh my goodness. So listen, if someone says, again, this might be just because I work in reentry work, I think I'm showing my hand here. But if someone gets upset and they say, hey, I'm about to catch a case, or I'm finna catch a case.
Yeah.
Are you familiar? What is a person saying when they say, I'm finna catch a case?
It's about to go down. You about to get beat up.
And I'm willing to catch a case.
If somebody's about to catch a case, if somebody's about to throw these hands, somebody's taking their earrings off.
Not the earrings.
You know, what I love about black people is we will always warn you. You know what I mean? We will always let you know what's
about to come in.
Like, don't say I didn't tell you. Nobody will just pop you out of thin air. We will let you know.
That's right. You know, it's so funny. It makes me think of Dr. Carter Jackson when older folks would say things like, all right, you're running out now. You running. Like my grandmother would say, all right, boy. All right, when I get you, I'm gonna get you for old and new. Like I've been keeping score. I've been letting your little narrow tail slide. But when I get you, but you're right. Even your grandmama, even people would say, they would give you that warning so people don't just pop out. And you got to know the sign. If a black person roll that neck and say, oh, hell no, back away, something's about to happen, particularly if the earrings come off.
Go and get me a switch.
Go get me, go get me something to beat you with. You know it's about to go down. Oh, my God. Thank you for that. I needed to laugh in doing that.
Same. It's
may
fun.
I tell you, one of the things that I struggle with as a kid in college is that I'm a slow reader because my mind wanders and I live through things. And my mind goes around it. So it takes me a while to read. But when I tell you I enjoy reading your book, We Refuse, I want you to know when your great-great-grandmama stepped on that rusty nail, I saw the nail, I saw the doctor, I saw the room, I saw him with a vest on and a stethoscope and how he looked at your great-great-grandmama and what he offered. But I want you to know something. I was deeply touched. I was in a conversation with my daughter, who's a librarian. She just finished her master's in library services. She said, Dad, I want that book. I want to read it when you get done. So I just need to tell you, kudos to you for in writing this. And for when I say I read something, just because it takes me a while, I said that I was intrigued. I was captured. I could resonate with a lot of it. I think it's important that books resonate, but you bring in a lot of course, you're an academician. You bring in a lot of scholarship, but you substantiate so much of the Black experience. And so I can't wait to jump.
It's a lot of family stories
I just love it. I just want you to know we're going to put a link in our notes so that people can get the book. But I just want to tell folks, We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resilience. It's really, really powerful. So if I may, I'm just going to jump into some questions, particularly leading talk about the story about your grandmama's gun. Let me tell you, my grandmother was a sharecropper in southeast Missouri. She didn't call it Missouri, she called it Missouri. And had suffered a nervous breakdown. In the 40s, she had 4 kids, and they all had different last names. So we know the subtext behind that, and probably what was happening in society to lead to that. She didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to be promiscuous. Folks had access to our women of all hues and background. But the thing was, the night she came to faith, the night she had a come to Jesus meeting, she told me when I went up in that church, because she was not a church woman, she said, I had a knife, an ice pick, and a 45 in my purse. But I've always known my grandmama as a church lady who could make waffles from scratch, who could cut up potatoes and make you some homemade French fries. I'm trying to think, why would my grandmama go to church with a knife, an ice pick, and a 45 in her purse? Until I read page 119. And I said, wait a minute. Like, you would look at her now and think, or look at her when she was living and not think that was her background, but there was some reality that was there. So I need you to know that brought me in real deeply. Last thing I say, if I get into the questions, that my sister used to be infatuated with BB guns. So she had a revolver. So about a month ago, my sister and I were hanging out. We worked together here in the community and ministry and our nonprofit work. And I said, whatever happened to your BB gun, your revolver BB gun? We called her grandmother Mama. She said, I gave it to Mama. And I said, why? She asked me for it. And I was like, why would missionary evangelist church mother Lillian Evans want your BB gun? So I just said that all as context, that when you told that story, I imagine that there was some surprise when you discovered that there was a gun kept by the bed. So I just want you to talk to me a little bit about that.
I'll tell the story.
Yeah,
I'll tell. So what happened was my grandmother, this is my dad's mother, passed away, and we all went to Detroit for her funeral. And then after the funeral, we were in. She lived in sort of like a retirement community. She lived alone in a small 1-bedroom apartment, but we were cleaning out of her apartment. You know how it is, sort of giving cousins and people that wanted things, giving away some of her stuff. And as we're going through her bedroom, we sort of saved that room for last. And my dad opened up the nightstand table, and he saw a .22 pistol, fully loaded, and a box full of bullets.
Wow.
And we were all standing around the room stunned, and we were like, Grandma's got a gun? And we like burst into laughter. I mean, if you knew my grandmother, I mean, she was the woman that made, the lemon meringue pies and, smelled like cinnamon. And, all the sort of things that you think about when you think of a grandmother. Went to church every Sunday, served in the deaconess, in the church. So we never thought of her. And she was always sweet as pie, always. So I did not grow up with guns in my house. I grew up in the suburbs, sort of a sheltered life. Sure. My dad did not think he grew up with guns. He later found out there were always guns in his parents' house. But guns were secrets. It wasn't something that people boasted about, talked about, sort of like, hey, check this out. That was never the context. It was always something that was hidden or secret. And later, I also realized that I shouldn't have been surprised that my grandmother had a gun, because she might have lived most of her life in Detroit, but she was a transplant. She was from Louisiana. And in Louisiana, she would tell stories about how on the weekends, her father, her brothers, her uncles, they would go to jail on the weekends. And I said, why would they go to jail on the weekends? And she said, oh, well, all the white men would get drunk in town and they would lynch any black men on the weekends. So if you were in jail, you were safe. And I was like, what? And it just, I could not reconcile, seeing jail is a place of safety.
Right.
I couldn't reconcile, on a Friday night going to jail and then coming out Sunday morning and going to church.
Right.
That jail was your alibi. That it protected you. And I can't imagine the sheriff saying, come on in,
right.
And you're pretty much hanging out until Sunday morning. It just baffled me. But when you grew up like she did in the South, where racism was rampant and black men and women for that matter could be either sexually assaulted or murdered without recourse, without any sort of, justice, that was her world. And so she carried that survival technique with her. And part of that was getting a gun and having a gun.
Wow. Wow. And so I know you said that you and your siblings were shocked. Was your dad equally shocked?
My dad was equally shocked. I think my dad, he's always sort of, this is the thing, on the Carter side of the family, people took secrets to their grave. They did not share what was going on. I remember one time my grandmother said to my dad, yeah, back when I had cancer. And my dad was like, you had cancer? She had it in her 40s. He didn't, they did not tell him. It was just like,
Wow.
we're going to beat it. Since we beat it, there's no need to tell you. So we're good now. I can't imagine my mother not telling me she had breast cancer or something of that nature, and it not being widely known. You kept everything close to your chest. And part of that is because some people in my family weren't always on the up and up. We had some number runners. We had some some people that were doing some black market activity. You didn't talk about that. People knew what they were doing.
But you didn't talk about it.
But no. And you certainly didn't talk about it with your children. And so, the siblings knew. My aunties knew.
Right.
But yeah, there was a night where I remember this as a kid, the alarm in the house went off. And I think it was someone who was coming in late and we didn't know. We set the alarm, and my uncle went and got his shotgun, and we're like, where you get a shotgun? So there were guns, but there were no conversations about guns. And I certainly didn't grow up like my husband's family. He grew up hunting, and guns were very much a part of his upbringing. And gun safety as well is a huge part of that. But yeah, it's funny because I'm an adult now, and I just took a gun safety class like 4 days ago on Sunday.
Really?
First time ever. I was like, it doesn't make sense. I was like, Kelly, you have a gun on every cover of your book. and I felt intimidated by guns. I felt agnostic maybe. I didn't know necessarily how I felt about it. I studied it, but I didn't grow up in a framework in which I saw guns all around me. And so by taking the safety course, my mind was blown, completely blown.
So
I have a whole new appreciation.
So interesting, particularly in light of what you're writing and what you're talking about. I think that's fascinating. In your estimation, what do you think happened to that image of the strong, armed black woman, the big mama that was packing? Do you think that was challenged as a conflict? With faith?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think politics of respectability or respectability politics, the way that black women were supposed to be, seen and understood, the way that black people were trying to get access to virtue in ways that white women possessed it. They couldn't be these sort of fearsome, angry people. That was terrifying to a lot of people. Yes. But it's to me, it makes a lot of sense why black women would be armed. All throughout the 19th and even the 20th century, black women were susceptible to violence, to sexual assault, to rape. And they needed to be able to protect themselves. There was not always a man in the household. They were the head of their households. And so guns made sense. And not just in a Southern framework either. Women who were living in the North, women who were living in the inner city, they needed a form of protection. But guns were never about showboating. They were never really even about gangs and gang culture and things of that nature. Guns were always about protection, and primarily from crazy white folks white folks would get out of pocket. And when I talk about in the book, people that were respectable, people like Daisy Bates that led the Little Rock Nine, she had guns all in her house. Ida B. Wells had guns. Rosa Parks talks about how during the Montgomery bus boycott, her kitchen table was covered with guns. So this was not something that I think ran counter to the images of a feminine, quaint black woman. But I think there are images that we didn't know how to explain without some nuance and some complicated conversations.
Sure.
And, it doesn't fit the narrative. But it's kind of why I like the cover of the book so much too, because it's a black woman who's armed on the cover. And I look at this woman and I'm like, I know her. I know this woman. This woman is in my family.
Yes.
This woman is an auntie. This woman is a grandmother. This woman is not hostile, but deeply protective.
And she's beautifully dressed too. She wearing that dress.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You know, it's that picture is actually a portrait by Taha Clayton, and it's called Soldier of Love.
Oh.
And I love it because all of the work I think that Black women do is deeply protective. And protection comes from a place of love.
I love it.
Black women are always looking out.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You know, so it makes me wonder. So, like, while I'm reading, I'm having these questions too. So, I'm curious, and then we'll get more into sections of the book I want to ask you about. But what do you think caused the emergence of sort of the mammy image that certainly runs counter to the image of this strong, forceful, protective Black woman who's taking care of, you know, of her family? Do you think that was a broader society trying to undermine the strength and the fierceness of the Black woman? So they give you this Aunt Jemima kind of idea. Do you talk to me about what you think about that? Because that's what came to my mind.
Yeah. You know, Mammy is a caricature, we should say. She is not based in reality. I think a lot of people would be surprised to see that Mammy oftentimes was a very fair-skinned Black woman. A woman that had been a product of sexual assault because of the close proximity of living in the home. I think we think of Mammy as this dark-skinned, larger woman because of Gone with the Wind. I mean, Gone with the Wind was such an iconic film that a lot of these films program us to think of Black women in a particular kind of way. Very asexual, unattractive, large, sassy, however, you want to sort of like define it. But nothing could be further from the truth. That person does not exist. You know, Black women came in all shades and sizes and always had to take care of their children and white women's children.
Yes.
And they are in some ways seen as the ultimate caregivers. And I don't think that's a dig. You know, I think that it is a part of the lived experiences of a lot of Black women is we've had to be caretakers. But there's a real burden that comes along with that too, that we don't talk about enough. But throughout the 20th century, certainly the idea of Mammy becomes this character that really gets like, brought to you like by Disney. You know what I mean? Like I think Disney, like when we think of Aunt Jemima, when we think of like these commodities that represent the home or like comfort or food, things that we associate with Black women's bodies as being these soft spaces that embrace us, that cook for us. You know, they are sort of like the proverbial like Mrs. Clean, if you will.
Sure.
There's a lot of nostalgia because Black women, 90% of them were domestic workers. They worked in Black and white women's homes, taking care of their children, being housekeepers, being nannies. My grandmother was a domestic worker for over 59 years. She worked for one white family for 3 generations.
Wow.
She did not retire till she was 79 years old. There was no pension waiting for her. There was no Social Security waiting for her. There was no protection in that job. And so people got accustomed to seeing Black women in white homes. That was their identity. Yeah, I read about this, not so much in the book. In another article, I read about my grandmother and her life as a domestic worker and just how troubling it is not to have a job, because all work has value, right? I'm not poo-pooing those jobs. Those jobs help sustain my family. But I'm so disturbed by the way white people understood those jobs, the way that the family that my grandmother worked for subordinated her. I remember I asked one of the white family members that she worked for, what they thought of my grandmother. And one of the descendants said, "Oh, I loved your grandmother. I loved her so much. I keep a picture of her inside my laundry cabinet. And every time I go to do laundry,
Dear Lord,
I think of her. And when I get tired and I feel weary, I think, if Ethel could do it, so can I." And I was gobsmacked by that.
You almost caught a case.
Yes, I almost caught a case. I almost caught these hands. I mean, who puts pictures of people they love inside their laundry cabinet?
White supremacist.
Okay, I mean, she's your proverbial Mrs. Clean. She comes out like some sort of Jiminy Cricket that comes and befriends you and helps you and cleans your house. I mean, that is not. There are a lot of people I love in my life. There are no pictures of them in my laundry cabinet next to my Tide
and your bleach and your Clorox bleach.
Yes.
Your Clorox bleach.
That's bananas. I keep pictures on my fridge. I keep pictures on like a bookcase and my desk.
Not your laundry room.
Not my laundry room. Not my laundry. Not people I love. Not anyone.
That is so wild.
But the fact that he said that as a compliment.
Yes.
He said that as like, look at how much high esteem I keep your grandmother in. It wasn't as though she was really a person to him.
Right.
Not a human being. She was an idea that made him feel good. That's troubling.
Oh my goodness. That's deeply troubling. Hey, good people. You're hearing this message from me because you're enjoying a Black Like Me podcast episode. And like so many people throughout the U.S. and around the world, you're perhaps enjoying and benefiting from these honest conversations between everyday extraordinary Black people and how they navigate our world. It actually takes a lot of work and creativity to produce an amazing podcast episode for your personal and professional enrichment and enjoyment. But you can help lighten the load by pausing for a moment and considering the benefit of this podcast to you, and then clicking on the Patreon link in the show notes to become a supporter of the podcast. Listeners make this show enjoyable, but it's supporters that make it possible. For as little as $2 a month, you can help make this award-winning podcast even better. So take a moment and think about what this podcast means to you, how you respect it and how you look forward to it and how it gives you great insights. Click that link and support at a level that's commensurate with your benefit. Contrary to popular belief, podcasts are far from free and their impact is far more than merely nominal. So I invite you to take a moment, join with me in making this podcast even more powerful, even more polished, and even more popular. We want to take these conversations around the world, and you can be a part of that. Click the links now. As I read the book and listened to some of the statements you made, I found them to be so insightful and accurate and provocative, particularly when you said things like, rather than asking about people's methodology for addressing violence that was present in their communities, let's talk about why they needed to do it. Like, rather than talking about why someone's fighting or why someone has guns, let's talk about why they weren't protected. Let's find out why the Black Panther movement had to create its own protective force to support our women, our moms, our sisters, our families, our little brothers. And you just kept stating that unapologetically. And you also turned that knife when you said, and this is why white scholars don't really talk about the violence of white supremacy, because they will understand their culpability or their benefit.
Yeah, they got to indict themselves.
They've got to indict themselves. I think those things, Dr. Carter Jackson, but I just need you to know that just resonated when you said that.
We don't question why white people are so violent.
No.
Why does not ask, why are white people so violent? Like, and this is the real dig for me, because the narrative around Blackness is criminality.
Yes, it is.
We always associate Black people with criminal behavior.
Yes.
They're thugs. They're scary. I feel threatened for my life. That's the narrative. We never talk about white people as the lead perpetrators of violence. And to me, it just doesn't make sense, because we really don't have a narrative precedent of Black violence committed against white people. Mm-hmm. We don't have stories where 4 little white girls are killed in the church
when you said
right
that.
before service.
Right.
We don't have stories of white men assassinated in their driveways like Medgar Evers. We don't have stories of white little boys that travel to the north or the south and are killed at 14 years old for speaking to a Black girl. We don't have these stories in which Black people are enacting mass violence on white people.
In a church setting, in a Bible study, in a church setting.
There's no Black Dylan Roof.
Right.
There's no Black person that goes into a white church, is welcomed by that white church, and then fed, and then turned around and that Black person shoots up the whole church. I mean, this is fantasy. Like, I think I talk about this in the book too, that revenge is a white imaginary project. White people are consumed with revenge. White people think that black people are out to get them. Black people are not bothered. Black people want justice. Black people are not consumed with getting whitey. Like, that's just
Come
not
on.
our project. That's not our passion or our pursuit. And it just boggles my mind when we have all these shootings and we have all of
Come
this
on.
violence, and we don't say, what's wrong with white
Right.
boys?
Where's the summit? If we
wrong?
shut up one school, white people would take their kids out of public schools and create their own. They would start homeschooling a whole generation. When now, if we hear a bank robbery or something, we might think, oh, geez, I hope they're not black. We may hear certain things. When we hear of a school shooting, for most of us, it never goes through our mind that it's a black person. But if it were, there'd be all different kinds of
Yeah.
strategies.
But it would also be an anomaly.
It would.
In a lot. I mean, when we think about school shootings, 9 out of 10 times, sometimes 10 out of 10, it is a white male. And
Right.
we don't try to address that violence, or we dismiss it by saying they were mentally disturbed.
Yes, they were.
And that's how we
They
dismiss
were
it.
bullied.
We
They were
don't-
bullied. They were a loner.
There was something wrong. And I just think, I want to call BS on all that and say, like, we have got to interrogate white violence. We have got to stop looking at black people to be nonviolent and start saying, whoa, white people, why aren't you nonviolent?
Right.
Why are you causing black people to have to defend themselves? It's we ask a lot of the questions we ask are the wrong questions.
Right.
I think.
No.
And that's because we've been given the wrong script.
Exactly.
The wrong narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love how you brought that out. You tell a powerful story about Clara, beginning on page 126.
Yeah, Carrie Johnson.
Yeah.
Carrie Johnson. That's Claire's her real name, but Carrie is her
Carrie,
name.
got you. And there's a lot of stories you tell, of these untold stories about strong black women. But can you just walk us through that story, particularly in light of what just recently happened with Sonia Massey's death? And so let's just walk us through, just that chapter on power.
The story of Claire or Carrie Johnson. Carrie's a 17-year-old black girl that is living in Washington, D.C. in 1919. And for those of our scholars out there, 1919 was also known as Red Summer. It was a summer in which there were race riots that took place all over the country. Black people are being murdered in scores. And in this particular riot in D.C., it was sort of an anomaly because it was the first riot in which more white people were actually killed than black people. But during this riot, Carrie's living in her home with her father, and white mobs are basically going to black neighborhoods and they're attacking them. They're throwing rocks into their homes. They're pulling people out of streetcars. They're beating black people up on the spot. They're murdering black people on the spot. They're shooting into black homes. It's terrifying. And so Carrie is in her house on the second floor. She goes up to the roof. She sees this mob of hundreds of people coming down her block, and she's armed. And she starts taking pot shots at the mob, like just picking people off. She hits a person, and the cops who are there are not at all interested in protecting black people, black property. One of the white mobbers comes up to the police and says, hey, there's somebody on the roof. There's somebody on the second floor. They're shooting at us. And so the cops go in to investigate the black household,
of course.
not the white people that are causing all this havoc. And it's two police officers that get to her front door. They knock down the front door. They don't identify themselves. The entire house is dark. They creep up the stairs. They get to the second floor. They open up the bedroom door. Carrie and her father are hiding under the bed, and Carrie starts to shoot. And I like to think that her father was probably like, hey girl, don't wait on nobody to give you any reason. Like, you defend yourself. And she starts shooting. They don't know where the bullets are coming from, so the cops are shooting back. I think her father takes a bullet to the shoulder. Carrie takes a bullet to the thigh. And one of the detectives, a man by the name of Harry Wilson, is shot and killed. And it is pandemonium. More officers come to the scene. Carrie and her father are dragged from under their bed. They're dragged out to the street. They're arrested. It's clear that Carrie's the shooter because everyone in the neighborhood knows, like, she was up taking pot shots. She was defending people. And this one black man is like, girl, like, what did you do? That kind of thing. And it is just wild to me that after she is arrested, she stands trial. She's actually convicted as being guilty. They tried to plea self-defense. She gets convicted as guilty. They appeal the case, and the prosecution says, you know what? We don't want to prosecute this again. And they drop the charges, and she's free to go. It's about a 2-year process.
Oh, wow.
And can you imagine a black 17-year-old girl killing a cop and then being acquitted, essentially, like being let go?
Right.
The judges saying sort of like, self-defense. The white newspapers were so, I think, embarrassed that a black girl had killed this white cop that they don't even say it's a black girl. The newspapers are like, white cop killed by Negro. They don't even say man or woman, just Negro. They leave you to assume
it's a man.
That it's a man. And the black press covers it extensively. They want to know what happens to Carrie. They're raising funds all over the country. The NAACP, the National Council for Negro Women, they're all raising funds because they see Carrie as a hero. There's a little 11-year-old girl who writes a poem about her in the black newspaper in Baltimore and says, you read about Carrie Johnson, wasn't she brave and keen? No, you read about Carrie Johnson, wasn't she brave? She killed a detective or something like that. Talks about her being brave and keen. I'm botching the quote.
No, but I get you.
It's this idea of like her celebrating her actions, not saying like, girl, what did you do? Like, people understood she was defending her home. She was defending herself. She was defending her community. And they praised her.
Right.
And we don't know what happens to Carrie after that. I say in the book, that's kind of where the historical record ends. We don't know what happens to her relationship with her father. That's also kind of messed up. Her dad sort of takes a plea deal, sells her out in order to get his own freedom. So I don't know what their relationship was like, but my goodness.
So then they both were out.
Yeah.
I bet he slept with one eye open because old girl.
I cannot
could shoot.
Imagine selling out your child. But that's what he did, and that's where the story ends. But I use it as a story to say that, like, we do have instances. When we look in history, we do have blueprints and roadmaps for how Black people defended themselves. And no, we didn't all sort of like, take this beating laying down, that Black people have always defended themselves. They've always come to their own rescue. And sometimes they've had to use guns to do that.
Sure.
And not in every case are they killed or thrown under the jail. In some cases, they are victorious.
Yes. And that information, I'm sure, is so frightening to not just white academicians, white scholars, but also to the white community, because I think it's important for Black youth to know the full story. I was given a presentation for our Center for Black Excellence in Culture and what we're envisioning for its educational programming. And part of it, I was trying to explain to these funders the impact of knowing our full history. When our kids find out that we didn't just take it lying down, that we didn't just say, I don't know nothing about birth of no babies and run in for the, but that they actually stood up, and when they realized that their great-great-grandmothers and great-great-grandfathers were real ones.
Yeah. Oh, gangster.
It makes them begin to think about things. Not that we all want to go get a gun and start shooting at folks, but the fact was they had
there's pride.
They had agency. They had self-agency because let me tell you, you can't convince me that somebody didn't high-five George Zimmerman and said, and we stand our ground in Florida. And, you didn't know, but you had the right to protect yourself, that when the shoe was on that other foot, people certainly get it. Also, I was thinking, we recently had a live podcast event, and my sister was part of the panel with me. And she made a statement. And once I read this part in your book, I actually reached out to her. And she said at our live event, we know that men are being killed in the streets and police custody. She said, but there's an emergence of Black women being killed in the home. She goes, now let's just let that sit still for just a moment. People with Breonna Taylor, with Sonia Massey, she said people are coming up and women are being killed in their homes and
inside
their homes, like where they should be safe. And
almost deep inside their
Almost.
home. I mean, we're not talking about the porch. We're talking about their bedroom.
Yes.
The kitchen.
The kitchen. Like I was saying to my team as we were preparing for this, I said, okay, almost every Black delicacy begins with a pot of water. I don't care if it's greens, yams, beans, corn, you name it. It be eggs, you boiling potatoes to make the pies. How that police officer thought that she was going to kill him with a pot of water in the name of Jesus. It also talks about this embedded fear, probably from what he knew had been done to Black people, and particularly Black women, maybe what he was intending. Black people are very insightful and are very intuitive. But to actually have the audacity to think that she was going to kill him with a pot of water and rebuke him. I mean, that seemed like some serious demonology. I'm not trying to sound like,
It's irrational.
It's irrational.
There's no way, there's no thinking, rational person that can shoot someone who's unarmed in relative close proximity. And the thing that always kills me too is that it's never like, it's always the kill shot. It's never like you shoot to wound or, not that I'm suggesting that's better, but do you know what I mean? But it's always like the
she didn't have a machine gun. She had a salt pot. She had a pot.
Exactly. We never hear about cops like, I shot him in the foot so he couldn't run.
Right.
We never hear that. Right. It's always, there's just, 10 body shots. And you're like, what? Why did you need to kill someone? Why are there 40 bullets in this person? Why is it, that makes no sense. We don't, again, and I think it goes back to like not questioning why not only are white people so violent, but why are white people so irrational about their fears? Because they actually can't base it in like,
no, they can't.
Well, there's all this precedent for how Black people have killed white people.
How they boiled them alive in the kitchen.
Yes. If that was the narrative, then okay. If that's the precedent, then sure, let's talk about it. But that is not the case.
It's not.
And so, just to me, even in the reverse, I feel like part of the reason I wrote this book was because I hated the tweet that was circulating on Twitter and social media that was like, be careful, I'm not my ancestors. And I was like, what? Like, what does that mean? Like this idea that Black people also in the past have not fought back in ways that have been effective or fought back in ways that have been forceful enough. Like, none of that could be true. Like I think about comments that Kanye West has made about, Black people seeing slavery as a choice. Like, as though that Black people just don't defend themselves. None of it adds up. None of it adds up. And it's so, I think, hurtful to live in a world in which Black fears are never taken seriously, where white fears are always given priority, where Black words don't mean anything and white people have a beacon on truth. I mean, it just, I don't know how to navigate a world like that, which is why I wrote We Refuse, because I'm like, no.
Wow.
We refuse.
Right.
We refuse. And it's a collective. It's not I refuse.
We refuse.
We.
I love when you said, not today, Satan.
Not today.
And you probably wrote that before, this young lady rebuked this officer, in the name of the Lord. But it's interesting. You brought up something. You referenced the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the American Civil War, where you see the other side as the bad folks, the British. That we don't want taxation without representation, so it's our right. The French, it was. You got to go against the bad folks. But with the Haitian Revolution and resistance to slavery, it's interesting that even when we're trying to protect ourselves, we're still the savages. That if it were reversed, like we honor the Boston Tea Party, we honor the American Revolution because we were trying to break off from the British who were trying to strong arm us. We had the right to protect ourselves because we were on our own land, and you're not going to be over there in the UK and Britain telling us what to do. But yet we can walk up in a Black woman's house and shoot her in the face, shoot her because she's got a pot of water. You couldn't step back. Like, how far could she throw a pot of water?
Yes. And that's because freedom in some ways has become synonymous with whiteness. So white people are born with freedom. White people are entitled to freedom. White people are entitled to protection.
Yes.
White people, it's give me liberty or give me death. Black people, the expectation is, no, you're enslaved. No, so when the Haitian Revolution pops up, no, this is not right. You can't defeat a European power.
No.
You can't throw off your shackles. You can't be a real revolution. This is counterfeit. And so, in the age of revolutions, I can't tell you how many times my students know the American Revolution. They know the French Revolution. Comes to the Haitian Revolution. Yeah, isn't that about, they're not taught it in schools.
No.
They're not taught to understand the significance of it. And yet the crazy thing about it, and I make this argument in the book, is that the American Revolution is actually not that revolutionary. It's not revolutionary. Nothing changes for Native Americans. Nothing changes for Black people. Nothing changes for women. Nothing changes for poor white farmers. Like, all you get is a local power replaced from, this distant power, or distant power that's replaced by a local power, I should say. When I think of revolutions, I think of completely new systems.
Right.
I think of broken systems replaced by just systems. I think of a complete new direction and way of living. And only Haiti accomplishes that. Haiti is the only one that doesn't just say, no, France, you won't rule us anymore, but also slavery is henceforth and forever abolished. You don't get the abolition of slavery in the French Revolution. You don't get the abolition of slavery in the American Revolution. When you get it in Latin America, it is only because the Haitian government basically said, Simon Bolivar, we will not help you with your revolution unless you commit to freeing all of the enslaved. Like, South America has Haiti to thank for its freedom. He agrees, he gets the weapons he needs, and he's successful. But there's no revolution without the abolition of slavery.
And the revolution will not be televised.
Yeah, it will not.
It will not. I love the bold stand you took in asking the question, why is nonviolent response the only acceptable response, and have we measured its efficacy? What has it really changed? Is it really revolutionary? And if white people are in favor of it, does that not, by mere association, indicate that maybe it's liked because it's not as revolutionary as it really needs to be? And it makes me think about how in educational settings, white educators have triangulated the Black community and the white community's understanding or relationship with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. That is either or, and is it not somewhere in between? And I love the way you bring that together. And were there things accomplished by what Huey Newton did and what the Black Panthers were modeling? Did that not have a role in moving the agenda further during the Civil Rights era?
Absolutely.
In addition to the nonviolent protests, but it brings something to the forefront where I feel like you were saying something that I stated: white people, you can't tell us how to respond to oppression. You don't get to pick
that part.
How we protest.
That part.
But you also broke down how we resist and how we use other means like joy and resistance and force. I just thought that was brilliant. And joy, I just have to underscore the role of joy. And flight, and how we just need to move away a little bit. In my development, like, I've been running Nehemiah, our Black focused human service organization for 32 years. And every time I would get an innovative idea, I would be asked by the white funders, well, what does Mount Zion think? Or what does this leader think? As if I couldn't be innovative. So after a while, I moved. I'm not from Madison, but I started spending a lot of time in New York. I started spending time with Korean American business leaders and thought leaders who had connected me to an international political structure, business structure. And I saw myself differently. And I found that I was communicating with international leaders and didn't even know who my local congressperson was. But I'm having exchanges on my personal cell phone with a Korean dignitary on his personal cell phone as we're processing his political career because he wanted a pastor's perspective. Came back to Madison, re-engaging the community with a new global perspective, a new sense of myself, of how people around the world responded to me, but also a different set of resources. Some of these leaders resourced my work so that I could challenge white supremacy and the lack of black leadership being allowed to not just be at the table, but set the table. But as I read that, I realized I removed myself professionally. I never moved because my family was here, my mom was here.
Yeah.
But I spent a lot of time out of town to recombobulate. And when I came back, I re-engaged Madison differently. And so I just want you to know that as you're writing this language,
good. That's flight, because flight is a tool.
It's a tool. I came.
Sometimes you gotta leave.
Because, and let me tell you what happened. I came back with different money than what everybody else had. Now I wasn't wealthy, but I could then tell funders, "You shut up and go sit down somewhere." And because I could say things because they could not come against my money, and because it wasn't theirs. And they couldn't question my leadership because I align myself in the black community. I'm a pastor. I'm an alpha. I'm connected with other stuff. I'm comfortable with my blackness. I went to UW-Madison. I was a paper boy. Like, I had the pedigree. And because I'm from Madison, I knew how to build bridges in the white community. But that flight, I had to step away to really see myself different. So I just think as you're talking about these things, that flight part, I just want to encourage you. Not that I'm trying to tell you how to write. I want you to do something with that, even if it's just like a whole separate lecture or workshop. I know. That's powerful. So it's powerful.
It's so funny. Like, I realize each chapter could have been its own book. You know what I mean? I could do a whole book on joy. I could do a whole book on flight. I could do a whole book on force. I mean, like, I kind of have with Force of Freedom. But, like, I think about, well, let me clarify. For our listeners, we should say, so the book is broken up into 5 chapters. And each chapter represents what I think is a different tool that Black people can use. Revolution, protection, force, flight, and joy. And this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but I think it's important because one of the things my Gen Z students have taught me is that, like, dichotomies don't work. We can't just, it's either this or it's that. It's right or it's wrong. You know, it's black, it's white. Like, that is not the world that we live in. And the idea of, like, it's violent or it's nonviolent, or you can only be nonviolent. There are limitations to nonviolence we have not been honest about. And there's a real efficacy to violence that we're also afraid to talk about. And, like, how do we get to a place where we can be effective in the goals that we're trying to achieve? And, like, when I talk about flight, it's funny because flight is not just like being James Baldwin and going to Paris. I mean, sure, that's great. And some people can do that. Not everybody can afford to go to Paris. And James Baldwin was very broke while he lived in Paris, bummed off people's couches and stuff. But, like, there is something about being able to leave a space, even if it's temporary. I mean, that's what the Great Migration was. My family starts out in Louisiana and Mississippi. They migrate up to Detroit. When things got rough in Detroit, they migrated back down to Texas and to other places in the South, to Atlanta. You know, if you're in a rural area, maybe you move to the city. If you're in the city, maybe you move out to the rural area because you're so tired of the grind, you know, like, and it could be, flight can be quitting a job. Flight can actually be reading a book and being exposed to something that you have never sort of opened your mind to. Flight can be intellectual. So, you know, but I do say, though, that flight, out of all the tools, is probably the most ineffective. And I'll say it because flight is more about the individual than the collective. And because anti-Blackness is global, let's just be honest, there's nowhere we can go, right? Like, I've been all over the world. There's nowhere I can go where white supremacy or anti-Blackness is not a thing. And there is nowhere we can all go. You know, I might get a reprieve being in Paris or being in Portugal, but I can't give that to everyone in my community. So it means that we have to really do the work right where we are. But sometimes we need a reprieve. Sometimes we need a respite. Sometimes enslaved people were truants, meaning they couldn't run away from slavery. They couldn't get to Philadelphia. But sometimes they ran away for the swamp and they were in the forest for 2 or 3 weeks. And they would just run, or sometimes they would run away to another plantation and hide out with their loved ones. And
I didn't know that until you said that. I was like, wow.
Yeah, because they needed a break. Like, they would find ways to rob their master of their time and their labor. There's one story, I don't know if it's in the book, I can't remember because I've told so many stories, but there's a story of an enslaved woman. I teach this in my class too, so sometimes I can't remember what I'm teaching and what I'm writing about. But she is an enslaved woman who runs away, and she goes out to like the swamps almost for like 2 weeks. She gets captured, she gets brought back to the plantation, and as her punishment for running away, they put her in a wheelbarrow that had been nailed with nails, that had been hammered through with nails. So she's being cut up as she is being rolled in this wheelbarrow. They get her out of the wheelbarrow. That's your punishment. Don't ever run away again. She says, it was not 2 weeks later until I ran again because I could not stay there. That was the quote. I could not stay there. And I just, again, gobsmacked at the idea that this woman, even after that horrible, torturous, violent punishment, was undeterred in her desire to be free and to escape the plantation. And if they kill me, they kill me. But I'm not staying here. I'm not staying here. And that is part of our ancestry. That is our legacy. That desire, that tenacity, that perseverance, that endurance. That's our legacy.
Definitely. And I think as an opportunity, as Madison's longest serving faith leader, I think it's also got to be our theology.
Oh, absolutely.
That we've got to figure out how we live into this and not be apologetic, because the subjugation of any individual to another is just wrong, ungodly. It's evil. And so so many places, there's got to be more consistency by just saying, well, just stick it out in the sweet by and by. These folks believed in the sweet by and by, but they also believed in the here and now, and not just the here and after. And we got to think about these things. You created some space for some powerful conversations. Hey, one more question, because I don't want to hold you up too late. Is I did a little research to understand that you love dolls. Is my research?
I do love dolls. How do you know that?
I got people. My little sister does too, and part of her work, she's a social worker and also a pastor, but she does work with young girls who are survivors of sexual incest and sexual abuse. So outside the home, but particularly inside the home, where it's harder to talk about. And part of her work is to give out Black dolls in the U.S., but in the D.R., and also a part of the African diaspora. And little girls just hold them and hug them. She also paints caricatures of Black girls. UW has hired her to do stuff. The school district. I've got to send you some of her artwork that she does. Man. But tell me a little bit about your love of Black dolls.
Look at this. I know you can't. I know this is a podcast and people can't see it, but this is the global history of Black girlhood. And do you see those dolls on the cover?
Yes.
Like it's beautiful.
Yes, it is.
It's absolutely beautiful. And
I gotta get that.
It's such a good book.
I gotta get that for my sister.
Corinne Field and Lakeisha Simmons. But dolls. So my love of dolls obviously started in childhood.
Sure.
I had, when I was a little girl, and I'm still kind of kicking myself because I wish I had been given this doll as adults. I would have taken care of it. You know how you get Barbie dolls, you cut their hair.
Right, you don't know. You don't
do
know.
all kinds of. But my mom would not buy me white dolls. I only had Black dolls. And one time, my aunt sent me these vintage Black Barbie dolls. One was a Diana Ross doll.
Oh, I remember her.
I had.
I remember.
She had long fingernails. Like she was just looked just like Diana Ross. I had a Sonny and Cher doll. Those are not Black, but like I had a almost like I had an African Barbie doll that had cornrows. She had dark Black skin, almost like the color of a plum. And she was beautiful, and she had braids in her hair that I have tried to find this doll like on eBay, I don't know where this doll came from. It was epic. And I feel safe with dolls. I feel domestic with dolls. I feel fun with dolls. They make me feel good. I collect a lot of historical Barbie dolls that come out.
Oh my goodness.
I have a Gullah Sea Island doll that I got when I was in South Carolina that's made with the seagrass. I have dolls that I've collected from South Africa and from Ghana. I get dolls from South America. I have dolls that look like even little mammy dolls that I got when I was in Colombia. I give them to my daughters, the ones that are not valuable, I will give that I don't mind if they sort of like drag around the house. But there is something I think very comforting, very soothing, and very pleasurable about being able to enact and play girlhood and to sort of have an escape. I think that's why the Barbie movie resonated with so many women, that people were crying in the movie, because when childhood is tough, you can escape. And sometimes that's a book, and sometimes it's a doll. Sometimes it's a book and a doll, like the American Girl series was for me. I was huge into Addie and the American Girl collection.
Now, do you know that was headquartered in Madison?
No way!
Oh, yeah, I know the...
Wait,
what? I know the owner. I've met Pleasant Franchi. It's right on the west side of Madison. American Girl doll was sold to Mattel for like $700 million, and that's how our Overture Center was funded. So Jerry Fracci and Pleasant Rowland sold American Girl doll, gave $200 million to the city. I think I'm getting my numbers right, to start the downtown Overture Center. I can get in my car, and the Pleasant Rowland Foundation building is right. It's 2 miles west of the university on University Avenue. It started right here. It started right here in Madison.
That is crazy.
Yes.
Because now my daughter, she's 7, and she's reading the American Girl collection.
My daughter had them 20 years ago.
Yeah, she's reading Addie, and then she just picked up Josefina, is the Mexican-American girl, and her name is Josephine, and she's like, I'm reading Josephina. I'm like, it's Josefina. And she was like, no, Josephina.
When she comes here, when you're in Madison, because you have connections here, when your daughter's in Madison, you all should at least just drive by the space. In fact, I grew up, but I knew people whose relatives make clothes for American Girl. Like they actually had this line of where they make clothes. You know, American Girl dolls had cruises. Like we would take our daughter to Chicago to go to the shows to get their hairs redone, but they were made, designed, and I have actually had conversations with the founder of American Girl doll, because she's still living here in Madison, and she and her husband are donors of our Center for Black Excellence in Culture.
I love it. I mean, I'm telling you, there's something about, especially the American Girl collection, like, because I'm a historian, like, reading it to my daughter, and I remember my daughter asked me, she said, Mommy, is Addie real? Like, this is history. Is she real? And I said, well, no, it's historical fiction. So, and then I had to explain her, like, what fiction is, what historical fiction is. But that, it just resonates knowing that maybe she doesn't exist, but something like this could have happened. And how we can interact with someone in this really, I think, special and even intimate way. We don't talk enough about dolls. There's a museum I want to go to. I think it's in Kansas City, Missouri. That's like the American Doll Museum or something like that. There's an African American Doll Museum here in Massachusetts that I've been to that I was like starstruck.
No, I love it. Listen, I'm going to put you in touch with my sister, because she actually, she's a former social worker. She actually uses dolls, black dolls, for therapy. She says the way girls will hug it. And she said the interesting thing is that when she does art fair on the square and she's designed artwork, stickers, white girls will walk past her table 2 or 3 times and will say, Mommy, I want that. She's so pretty. And sometimes parents won't buy it because I think they're afraid they're appropriating or, how to do that or how to explain it to their kids. But I've got to put you in touch with her, because what you described, how you worded it, helped me to understand my sister better. And I think she had I think the Barbies, was it Chrissy? Is Chrissy a black Barbie doll? I grew up with Chrissy. Let me tell you, don't tell nobody. But because just the 2 of us, because of Chrissy and Barbie dolls, I was ready when I had a daughter, like 20 years later, because when my wife was at work and stuff, I knew how to French braid that stuff. Now, it was still kind of messy, but I knew how to put a barrette on it and brush that baby hair back and take my baby out in the streets, and we go grocery shopping.
Because it's fun.
Listen, I had a sister. If you want somebody to play with, you got it. Listen, I ain't going to even lie. I knew I was going to have a daughter one day. I know how to do hair because of Barbie dolls. Because my sister would make me play with her.
That's how my daughter's learning how to do hair, is with dolls. Like, there's something about adornment. There's something about brushing hair. There's something about putting on clothes and picking out what they wear. There's something about that connection that I think
I love it.
Is both joyful and I'm sure as your sister will tell you.
Yes.
So thank you for asking me that. Nobody's asked me about dolls. How you find out?
I want
you got ops.
We
got
do,
people.
and I want and what I love about our podcast is that it gives me a chance to further explore the humanness and the humanity of my guests. Of course, you're a scholar and you're a mom and you're a wife and you teach and you're a researcher, but you're like dolls and you have these things. You like savory grits with kale chips in them and seaweed and whatnot.
Don't judge
That's
me.
right.
Don't judge me.
Somewhere down the road, Dr. Carter Jackson, I would love to have a conversation with you about our Center for Black Excellence in Culture. We've broken ground. It's a 37,000 square foot space where we're going to put Black excellence. We have 2 performing arts spaces in there, maker space, video, a Black library that my daughter's going to run, a Black innovation space, a Black lounge for entertainment, but space for book festivals and film festivals. But you've given me language. Part of what the center does is it gives people space for flight. If it's just Tuesday night, for Ghanaian night, for Nigerian night, for Dominican Republican night, I want to create space so that we can have Black joy and have these spaces.
Yes,
so
the flight is connected to joy.
and connect to joy. Those are 2 things that are driving me so that people can re-engage society. So I would love to have that discussion, but also because we just broke ground this last week, so we're going to be planning pre-opening kinds of activities and all opening activities. I just want us to, I want to be in touch with you because when we do lecture series and things, I want you to.
Yes,
So listen, thank you.
Fantastic. I got fam, so you know
do.
I will come.
So I just want you to know, I just think there's so much that we want to do. Well, thank you. And I want you to be part of our launch and our story and the African American History Studies Department here. It's helping to build relationships and connections that I really, really love. And I'm not supposed to say this publicly, but I say it right here to you and my closest listeners in 130 countries and 50 states. UW Madison is going to be unveiling in the next month or so my role in the department. So when that comes up, we're going to have even something else in common. It's very limited, but as a community practitioner, pastoral figure, we don't always get to be bridged with the academy. And my undergraduate degree was in African American Studies from UW Madison, and my mama's and my sisters. And so we need to talk.
That's special.
Because sometimes, Dr. Carter Jackson, I have these guests that come on, but then sometimes I want correspondence that maybe every 3 months I have them back just to say, hey, can we talk about the election and what you thought? Or maybe there's another shooting or something. Where a Black woman protected herself, not necessarily the victimization of it, but just from time to time, as your schedule allows. I think you have such a tremendous voice. And when we look back on our 200 episodes, our initial conversation was probably in the top 7 listened to podcasts. So there's no accident that we came back, that you were one of the most listened to of our 200 interviews.
I will come back anytime. Do you
come on here? Anytime. All right. I'm going to take
anytime.
Yes, ma'am.
It's always a pleasure.
Yes, ma'am.
It's always a pleasure.
No, it's so good to be here. Listen, folks, I told y'all, I tried to tell you that this conversation was going to be exciting and insightful, and that this sister, this department chair, this researcher is just on the move doing some great things that if we listen will allow the nation and the nations to think differently about what we really are saying we want. We want a place we can all get along. Do you really? Because Black people don't want to just play nice and just have a quiet sit-in. We want justice, and we want to express our full Black humanity, and we want to exercise our Black human agency. So we got some stuff that we're going to be talking about. And speaking of that, folks, get over to that Facebook chat, because there's going to be a question waiting for you. I'm going to be adding some questions in there, but join the private Facebook group. So get there, join the discussion. Special thank yous to my fantastic team. Eli Steenlich, who's sitting next to me right now, who's in charge of social media, editing, and production. Jeremy Holliday, who helps with research, editing, and production. He also helps me find secrets, not bad secrets, but good secrets and hobbies of my guests. Don Thornton, who's in charge of guest invites and production. Ariana Proctor, who's in charge of creating and moderating the listener space. Get to that listening space. And Jakisha Hunt, who's responsible for my merch. We're going to be introducing our Black Like Me podcast sweatshirts, t-shirts, and mugs really, really soon. And again, my special guest today was Dr. Kellie Carter Jackson. You guys have a great day. Lean in. Take a look at what's going on. This podcast is not created for your entertainment. It is created for your transformation. So lean in, change your mind. And for non-Black people, become a part of the team of folks who dismantle this crap that Dr. Carter Jackson talked about in her book. And we're going to be back soon to have our next guest. Have a great day. And thank you all for being the best part of Black Like Me podcast.
Black like me. Black like me.
I want to thank you for taking time to listen to this episode of Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. If you like that opening track of our theme song, you can show your appreciation to Corey Saffold, who created that and produced it, and Marcus Fleming, my cousin, who's on vocals. I also want to say that this podcast was started with the generous support of the Human Family Unity Foundation, and so we always want to stop and thank them for that. For the many patrons who support us through our Patreon page, thank you, thank you, thank you. You don't just listen, but you support, you lean in, and you help this podcast to be what it is. And then I need to thank you, the listeners, who make a point of downloading this, listening to it, and sharing it. Without all of you, this podcast would not be what it is and what it's becoming. Thank you so much.